Everyone, if you could please get your seats. We're ready to move on to the second and our final panel presentation for today. I'm delighted to have a group of fantastic experts here to talk about issues related to electric vehicles and what some of the implications are for transmission and the grid and things that are being considered in conjunction with trying to integrate some of this coming down the road. And to moderate our panel today, we have Brian Gemmell, who's on the board of directors for WIRES, former, now a past president of the organization. Brian's with National Grid. And Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the panel and get started with the discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here in Tennessee, and I'm thrilled to be on this panel this morning with the distinguished speakers. So, introductions, we have Alexa Voytek, who is from the Energy Programs Administration of the Tennessee Department of Environmental Conservation. We have Ryan Stanton, who is the EV Research and Technology from Tennessee Valley Authority. We have Kevin Hernandez, partner and Grid Edge lead at Scott Madden. And lastly, from the West Coast, Phil, thank you for coming. Phil is the Executive Director for the Alliance for Transportation for Electrification. So we've got a really great panel. We're going to try and be fun. We're going to try and be provocative. So at about 10 minutes before the hour's up, we'll be opening up to questions. So we're going to try and fill that 50 minutes or so with fun and provocative and information about this exciting topic of EVs and, importantly, the implications for transmission. You can sense I'm passionate about this. That was part of my job. I love it. But it's also personal for everyone here. You all own a car today. You have your driving patterns, with whether it be for commuting to and from work, going in long-distance trips. You get packages delivered from different Amazons of this world, right? And so this topic is going to touch every one of us in the room today. So I see a lot of nods going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some introductory comments from all the panelists. We're going to start local, and we're going to end nationally, going from light, medium, and heavy-duty electric vehicle perspectives. So with that, Alexa, let you go first.
Yeah, is this on? Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I'll just kind of set the stage and describe a little bit about the landscape in Tennessee specifically in the transportation electrification space and some of the work that we've been doing over the last 5-ish years to get us to where we are today in preparation for some of the work we'll do under the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. So back in 2018, TVA kickstarted an initiative and brought a bunch of key stakeholders to the table. The Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, Tennessee Department of Transportation, local governments, automotive original equipment manufacturers that we have in the state, such as Nissan, VW, GM, advocacy groups, universities, everyone who had a stake in this game. We all came together to develop our shared vision for transportation electrification in Tennessee. And we established a goal to get 200,000 electric vehicles in the state by 2028. And just for context, right now, we have about 18,500 on the road as of March 2022. And so we still have some work to do to get to 200,000 by 2028. We also identified 40-plus projects at that time that we could be working on to help drive that EV deployment. And so since then, we've established an initiative called Drive Electric Tennessee that's comprised of a number of these stakeholders contributing and chipping away at some of those projects and initiatives. One of the first projects we tackled was a statewide electric vehicle infrastructure needs assessment in 2019. And so through that effort, we took an inventory of our existing electric vehicle infrastructure and kind of the state of its operability, kind of figured out where the key gaps were that needed to be filled from different use case perspectives to help meet the needs and the demands of that 200,000 electric vehicle population by 2028. Through that needs assessment, we helped to determine that there was a big priority for public or utility investment in fast charging infrastructure on our corridors. Particularly given the low expected utilization in the short term, we didn't see the private sector kind of stepping into that space with much haste. And so we saw that as being a critical need to help also connect our rural communities with our urban areas, and make sure that that underlying backbone of fast charging infrastructure could be deployed. So even before the IIJA was even contemplated, TDEC and TVA signed an MOU or an MOA in early 2021 to co-develop and co-fund what we call the Fast Charge TN network. And so the idea here was that we were leveraging Volkswagen settlement funding on the TDEC side, and then TVA brought additional funding to the table to deploy fast charging stations every 50 miles, not only on our primary interstates, but we also selected some US highway secondary corridors as well that we're placing fast chargers on to really get into, like I said, some of those rural areas and make sure that we're really blanketing the state. We also partnered with the company Rivian, who is installing level 2 chargers at all 56 of our state parks. So that also kind of complements the fast charge network that we're building. And then, with the passage of the IIJA, obviously there's the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. And so we're working now collaboratively with TDOT, who will be the recipient or the flow through of those funds. For the state, Tennessee is expected to receive about $88 million over a 5-year period to work on the development of our state of Tennessee's deployment plan for that program. We have to submit that to the U.S. Department of Transportation by August 1st to be eligible and unlock those funds for the state. Just yesterday, we launched our website, tn.gov/EV plan, I believe. And there's a survey.
I believe in the string.
Yeah, and there's this public engagement survey there, and we are launching a road show next week. So for the next 3 weeks, we'll be traveling across the state, visiting kind of key areas along the different corridors to gather feedback from the public on how we should be implementing those funds. And so we're excited to continue to develop infrastructure and work with partners like TVA to make that a successful project. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Alexa.
Good morning. So I'm new to TVA. I actually came from the State Energy Office with Alexa and Molly, the Fearless Energy Office Director up here. Kind of touching on partnerships, I don't think we can underscore the importance of partnerships enough, between utilities, states, other stakeholder partners. I mean, it is the difference that we see in the success that we've had here, frankly. So TVA, kind of quick background. TVA is a federal agency. We're kind of a unique animal in the utility space. We're a generation transmission provider, and then we distribute, or we work with distributors we call local power companies, 153 of them across the Tennessee Valley. And we serve the vast majority of Tennessee, but we also serve parts of 6 other states. So Tennessee's kind of really been the leader, I would say, in the partnership with this fast charge network and EV initiatives in general. But we have work to do with 6 other state partners as well as for planning for future infrastructure. Kind of looking ahead, before going into the transmission side of things, we see transportation as a really unique way, and the electrification of transportation to kind of serve PVA's public power mission of serving the 10 million people that we serve across the valley, through both local power companies and some of the direct serve customers that we have. TVA has made some pretty substantial improvements to the grid and emissions. So today we are about 57% carbon free through a combination of nuclear, hydro, and solar and wind resources, and that will only continue to grow. So as we get into transportation electrification, the exciting part is that the transportation emissions, which are the largest source of emissions right now, will just continue to go down, but the intensity will continue to improve over time as well. So we see this as kind of a really fulfillment of TVA's mission, which is energy, environment, and economic development. Those are the 3 E's that we go by. And so with this goal of 200,000 EVs that Alexa mentioned, there's a couple of interesting economic and environmental numbers that go along with that, one of which is those 200,000 EVs, once they are on the road, that will result in about $200 million in consumer savings every year. So it's about $1,000 per vehicle of savings per year. That's pretty significant. That's money back in people's pockets. In addition to that, Tennessee, our region, we are not an oil and gas region, like other parts of the country, other parts of the world. By fueling with electric, you're actually reinvesting in the local economy by power production, local power companies, and kind of all the industries associated with that. So there's kind of a really strong local economic driver just by fueling with electricity locally. So those are some of the drivers, kind of the whys. Why is TVA and behind this? In addition to that, it's kind of hard to talk about electric vehicles without talking about some of the manufacturing investments that the Tennessee Valley and the Tennessee region has seen. I was trying to go back and calculate it all up. Over the last 10 years, I calculated over $20 billion worth of EV manufacturing investments over the last 10 years within the Tennessee Valley. So that includes everything from the Ford Blue Oval City, of course, we've heard a lot about over the last 8 months or so out in West Tennessee, a pretty transformative investment, $6 billion plant out there, which will include battery manufacturing. But GM has also done kind of a similar scale. They've got $4 billion in manufacturing investments down at Spring Hill. Nissan was kind of the original back in 2012, taking advantage of the original Recovery Act loan guarantee program to build the first battery gigafactory down there. And then, of course, Volkswagen in Chattanooga. So just substantial investment in EV manufacturing, driven in part by the kind of friendly business region. We think decent power rates have something to do with it, and the reliability that goes with that as well. So I guess to kind of end up on the transmission side before we kind of go from the state, regional, and national, some high-level analysis we've done. Kind of the impacts of EVs on the grid. There's discussion, from some camps that if everybody goes electric, if everybody buys an electric vehicle, the grid can't take it. The grid will break. And it's, obviously there's a lot more nuance to it. But as a general rule, we calculate just in the worst possible case scenario, which isn't feasible. If everybody did go electric today, it's about 10 million vehicles in our service area. It would be about a 25 to 30% increase in TVA's load. So it's not small by any stretch of the imagination, but we're not talking about doubling or tripling the existing energy use of the grid. So 25 to 30%. We think that, that scenario, whether it's 100%, whether it ends up at 50% or 90%, it's going to take a long, long time for that to play out. And the reason I say that, just last year we've seen by far the biggest growth in EVs in our service area, up to outside of just Tennessee. Alexa mentioned there's about 18,000 in the state of Tennessee. In our whole service area, it's about 25,000 electric vehicles, and so we're compared to areas like California and the West Coast and the Northeast, it's comparatively low. But we are seeing that the beginning, I think, of that hockey stick growth. But this is going to take 15, 20 years to play out. So we have a kind of a front row view into the manufacturing, the investment that automakers are making into this space. We see that it's coming, but Blue Oval City is still 3 years out from being able to release their first vehicle out of West Tennessee. So this is going to take a little bit of time. And kind of the last thing to end on, and kind of with respect to the impacts to the transmission system, in general, we're not seeing that the transmission system will be any kind of a bottleneck, in the near term. The really big concern, I think, is we're going to start seeing some impacts and improvements that will need to be made to accommodate EVs at the distribution level. So as our transmission folks, kind of told me prepping for this panel, the distribution system will be the canary in the coal mine for EV adoption for the transmission system. So, getting into large deployments of electric vehicles, when we start talking about hundreds of thousands and even millions of EVs in our service area, the distribution system is where the rubber is going to meet the road for a number of these things. So I'll stop there and hand it over and let Kevin take it from here.
Kevin.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And as Brian mentioned, I'm Kevin Hernandez with Scott Madden, and in working with utilities across the country, we've done a lot of work with them, but also, which is our bread and butter, but we've also done a lot of work over the last couple of years in EVs and transportation electrification, working with OEMs and with large national fleets. And why I think that that's important, and Ryan mentioned this issue around partnerships, which I think is very, very important, because What we're really talking about here is the creation of an ecosystem that doesn't yet exist. We have a lot of the players all coming to this from different directions, but it's really going to take an ecosystem approach with each stakeholder contributing and playing a part to develop the charging infrastructure and to manage that charging infrastructure in a way that is cost effective to customers, meets the needs of a transportation industry that today is fueled almost entirely by liquid fuels, and do so in a way that doesn't break the grid, which I agree won't happen, but is also not going to be a less than optimal from a cost perspective. So, utilities, I think, need to really think about, in particular, how their relationship with customers is going to change. I think electric vehicles, similar to how IT has done this a little bit, but electric vehicles in particular, are really and fundamentally going to change the relationship that utilities have with their customers, with their end users, both their residential, but particularly their C&I customers. For OEMs, we've worked with OEMs that have come to us asking, well, just how does the electric system work? There is a significant gap, a big void between electric utilities and their knowledge of the electric system and the transportation industry, and their needs from that system. That is a gulf that needs to be crossed, and it's going to take all parties to do that. And then from the charging station providers and others that are going to be involved in this also have to be brought to the table so that we build this system, this ecosystem, together in a way that's going to be optimal and will provide benefits to all the stakeholders together. So I'll pass it on to Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I've seen many old friends in the audience. It's good to be back with my friends on the transmission side. I think the message on transmission, you just heard it, is probably, as Ryan says, the canary in the coal mine will be in the distribution system. So we will be seeing some gaps and some problems in the distribution system, perhaps, depending on the hockey stick type growth that I believe is really going to happen. Transmission system remains to be seen. There's only one application at FERC for interconnecting with the bulk power transmission system. FERC denied it with prejudice, but I expect to see more of those, but I think most of the action is going to be with the state at the distribution level with the state PUCs and the state energy offices. Let me give you an idea of the market. I'm a little more optimistic than Ryan. I think the market is really taking off now. So 25, 26 is only 4 years away. So I'm going to talk a little bit about medium heavy duty as well as light duty, but you're going to see a number of light duty vehicles coming to the market, including the GM Silverado. You've heard about that, right? The Ford Lightning 150, you've all heard about the Lightning, right? May be produced in Tennessee, maybe right now it's being produced in Michigan at the River Rouge plant. The battery in the extended version of that, guess how big that battery is? It's about 180 kilowatt hours. 180 kilowatt hours. Just think of the load that puts on the house. Ford is going to sell that with Sunrun, a home intelligent management system for what we call a V2H system, in which a customer can back up the power in the house during a PSPS or a power outage for about 2-3 days, depending on the nature of the appliance. And of course, Sunrun wants to do more solar rooftop. So you can see this future where you have an auto OEM like Ford. Tesla, by the way, wants to sell retail electricity in Texas. It's applied to the commission. So what I'm painting is a picture that this industry, as the vehicles come out, the OEMs are not going to wait for utilities to get their act together on infrastructure. They need to sell cars. Fleets need to operate. They have business plans. So one of the questions, one of the real challenges, and you wanted to be a little bit provocative, is, and I'll focus on that a little bit more in heavy duty, is we aren't having a good conversation. As Kevin says, there's a big gulf now between the traditional type of utility planning, IRPs, loads and resources, and then how do you do a TE plan, and then how do you talk with an OEM in a fleet? So that's a key challenge. So what do we do at ATE? We founded this with the support of, I see many friends in the audience, Southern Company, National Grid, Excel, GM, Ford, Greenlots. We founded this about 4 years ago. What we try to do is go into the states, especially with the PUCs, and say, kind of get ahead of the curve here. This tidal wave is happening, and you should be ready for this. So we're active in about 20, 25 states. Some of the key states right now that we're active in are Colorado, Massachusetts, Washington, Florida, Texas, of course, California, North Carolina. And so some of those states have aspirational goals, as Alexa said, 200,000 by 2030 is Tennessee's goal, but my state of Washington wants to get rid of the ICE vehicle by 2030. California wants to get rid of the conventional vehicle by 2035. British Columbia has come out with a policy to get rid of ICE vehicles, go totally electric by 2030. Illinois has an aspirational goal of 1 million vehicles by I can just go down the list. States are acting. States are acting. So I predict, and this is based on ICCT, the International Council of Transportation, and BNEF numbers. Right now we have about 2.3 million light-duty vehicles in the fleet. We're way behind China and the EU, but by 2030 we expect to see 26 to 32 million vehicles on the road, light-duty, just light-duty. 26 to 32 million. That's a big number. The incremental growth load, I'm glad TVA has done this study. Many of your utilities have not done such studies, so we urge you to do both utility studies, and I'm urging EPRI, US DOE to do a national study, because when I go and give speeches these days before commissions and legislatures, they always say, Phil, what's the impact on the grid? What's the impact on the grid? And the numbers that you gave me is not good enough for those legislators or commissioners. They say, well, what about at the feeder level, Phil? What about at the substation level? Is the grid really going to be able to handle it? So I think we need to do a better job on that. But the incremental growth of electricity sales is going to be quite substantial. Just look at EPRI, BNEF, look at any of these forecasts. We really focus on best practices that a utility should engage with stakeholders, file portfolio of use cases. They should argue against third-party vendors. Certain vendors want to keep utilities out of the market. Utilities don't need to own and operate the EVSE. They can do what we call make-ready, or they can do a lease with a subscription rate. There are all sorts of ways, but don't allow, one of our key advocacy pieces is don't allow third parties to restrict your option. Obviously, the utility has the burden of proof. It's like what Commissioner Danley said this morning. Rates have to be JNR. There's a lot of flexibility in JNR rates, in rate design, and you have to prove your case, but don't allow parties to restrict you. So medium heavy duty, what are some of the key gaps? This is one of the big challenges we face. One of the challenges is we don't talk the same language. Fleets and utilities just talk different languages. Fleets are all about managing fuel costs, stability. They're concerned about resiliency too. During hurricanes and power shutoffs, they ask some very good questions about, well, if the power goes off, where do we stand in line to get power restored? And then I have to give them the song and dance of, well, during a cyber attack or a PSPS, guess who comes first? Hospitals, law enforcement. There's a whole hierarchy, and you need to talk to your EMDs. And so there's a real challenge there. We need to start talking the same language. Secondly is the interconnection process. The utility interconnection process is long. It's not targeted specifically on EVs. It has solar, it has lots of other demands in the interconnection queue. But I can tell you that waiting 160 days or even longer than that and not giving a fleet operator like an Amazon, a UPS, or a plumbing fleet, or whatever the fleet is, if the utility can't give an answer on when and how power can be supplied at that location, that's a problem. That's a real problem. Amazon can't deploy its Rivian vehicles without knowing that fuel is going to be available, right? Electric fuel. So we really need to do a better job on that. We need tougher conversations, frankly. Within the Alliance, we've started 2 task forces just within my Alliance in the last 6 months. One is on rate design, demand charges versus volumetric. So we've been spending a lot of time on rate design. And one that we just kicked off last week because Southern California Edison, National Grid, and some other utilities said, Phil, we're getting lots of complaints from third parties about our interconnection queue for commercial charging stations. What can we do? So we put together a task force to look at the interconnection process. So we hope we can come up with some best practices on that. But Brian, I think I'll just leave it on that note that when we had a panel on fleets at our annual meeting in DC about a month ago, and we had the Assistant Secretary from DOE speak, Michael Barabee, and Michael's a great guy. And so he talked a lot about fleets that are coming. And then we had a fleet operator, and then we had a utility, and then we had an OEM. And you could just tell that there was not a lot of coordination between those. So that's one of the challenges I think we really have to focus on. Thank you.
So thanks everyone for that. So we've heard a lot about with the light duty, medium, heavy, with state plans, number of chargers, the demand that you absolutely can see. But I see the role of transmission is really going to be at that range anxiety highway perspective, because the loads are going to be significant at those with that simultaneous charging for the driver experience as well as that medium heavy duty. So with that in mind, just as you've said, Phil, there, question, what do we as the utilities, bearing in, what do we need to be focused on to get to those tough conversations, having that, because we can't be the barrier to the electrification of businesses as well as the consumers. Where should we, members of WIRES, be focusing our efforts?
Yeah, I don't mind taking a first stab at that. I think there are a couple things. I think what you've heard from everybody up here is just this need to plan for this infrastructure, and there's a gap also between the current regulatory compact and the model that we have today, and the needs of particularly of fleets, but I think of other charging infrastructure as well. And so that part of this needs to be conversations with regulators about, are there models that we can use to start building some of this infrastructure ahead of time? Is there any kind of build ahead? Now that's almost an untouchable concept for a lot of states. The idea that you would build infrastructure that, prior to load coming online, or probably, firm commitments. But in a lot of areas, we know where these fleets are today. We know where their depots are today. They're not going to move them, right? They've invested millions and millions of dollars into where they are today, these logistics hubs. Oftentimes, in fact, most times, they're together. They're oftentimes around airports or other places where it facilitates a business. We know, and they've made commitments. They've told us, we are going to electrify these fleets. We can begin to build that infrastructure today. However, utilities today don't have a mechanism to recover those costs, and more importantly, can't really begin doing the design work and can't get really doing that engagement until they get that green light or some certainty that they'll be able to recover the cost of doing so. So I think that's one key piece that I would encourage everyone to think about.
You're talking about violating the used and useful principle. Yep.
I didn't say anything of the kind.
I can put on my former commissioner and NARUC president hat and wax on for this for hours, but I won't. But I think the regulatory issues are important, and used and useful, build ahead of need, all these things can be challenges, but they can be resolved. So my focus is to say the regulatory toolbox is very broad. And as we saw with the NOPR that came out of FERC, at least the majority of FERC, is responding to a public policy need, right? I think. So what are the public policy needs? Well, renewables, this and that. Okay, take it to the state level. Many of these states have acted. The governors have said, here's the public policy of my state. It's decarbonization. It's zero emission vehicles. So the commission has to get on board with that, right? Somehow. So if you take a very strict definition of used and useful, and if you don't broaden your perspective on a cost-benefit analysis to do a societal cost test, or something that recognizes what you said, Ryan, $1,000 a year in savings, right? The traditional utility cost test doesn't pick that up because it's not under the control of the utility.
And by the way, that $1,000 a year in savings did not account for $5 gas.
Correct.
That was $2.50
It
gas.
would be higher now. It would be higher now. But my point is that I think on the regulatory side, so you asked what should we do? What can WIRES do? Well, the first thing you do is get your internal act in order. So talk with your TE team. Talk with your clean energy teams who are working with the PUCs at the state level. Come up with a TE plan, a decarbonization plan that has a strong TE, transportation electrification element to it. That's number one. Second, go and talk to these people. Talk to Alexa. Talk to Ryan. Talk to state energy offices. Talk to the governors. Broaden, as we said, it's a partnership, so you have to talk to a bunch of people. I think over dinner last night you were talking about state DOTs.
Correct.
And how little they know about the electric power system. Go and talk to your state DOT about what is a high voltage transmission line? What is a step down transformer? What is a substation? How does the electricity system work? What is a radial line? What is a backbone line? You know, try to do electricity 101 with the DOTs. That's going to be important because they have to understand the network as they submit these plans and build infrastructure. Talk to your truck stop operators, right? So if you look at the guidelines coming out of NEVI, it's every 50 miles. You can build one of these 600 kilowatt minimum 4 charging station complexes. And it has to be 1 mile from the exit of the interstate. That, to me, just reading the plain language of the NEVI guidance, would favor C-stores and truck stops operators, the incumbents, if you will, right? Because they're there. They have these places, there's prime real estate, they're permitted. But is that really the intention of DOT and DOE? I don't think so. I think they want competition. And a lot of these truck stop operators, candidly, are in the first inning or the second inning of a 9-inning ball game. They're way behind Tesla, Electrify America, EVgo. They're way, way behind, and they're fighting a utility role. In the state of Georgia and Florida this year, we had to fight off legislation that would restrict the ability of Georgia Power and the utilities in Florida to build out infrastructure for charging stations because they want the utilities out of the game. They don't think you should make money. They don't think you should be involved in, that utilities should be involved in this business. So, but the point is, you do have Circle K, you do have 7-Eleven, you do have some truck stop operators who know better than that, right? They know that the utility has to be a partner. So my advice to you is pick them off. Don't deal with the national associations because their political rhetoric is very damaging, and we're fighting them. But if you can find truck stop operators and C-stores that want to work with you and regard the utility as a partner, and that would be good. I don't know if you're having that experience in the TVA service territory, but that's, Ryan, that's an issue that we've had in quite a few states.
Yeah, no, the truck stop, you know, the conversation, I mean, they are perfectly suited for charging stations. When you kind of look at, you know, the network that's going to be needed for light duty and for heavy and medium duty and kind of the line haul, the long haul trucking, which, you know, takes place. You know, Tennessee is kind of a major thoroughfare for a lot of freight. You know, kind of a connection between the East Coast and West Coast. You know, we see the a brewing battle, if you will, and kind of how this is going to play out. And if I can maybe throw a curveball into the conversation, there's this whole topic around hydrogen, and this battle will, you know, it's electric versus hydrogen for these heavy duty vehicles. It's you know, one that I don't, it's not borne out yet, and it's one the former colleague at TDOT actually he illustrated it interestingly. He said, "Hydrogen is the fuel of the future and always will be." and for a long time that's been true. I mean, how long have we been talking about hydrogen as a zero carbon fuel?
Yeah.
With the infrastructure bill, the $8 billion that's in the infrastructure bill for these clean hydrogen hubs.
The hydrogen hubs, yeah.
You know, they've said, you know, they want 4 regional hydrogen hubs in the country. This may be the thing that kickstarts hydrogen, you know, for a larger implementation of clean hydrogen in the transportation sector. So the next 6 to 12 months will be really interesting to see how this plays out with the proposals that get submitted to Department of Energy. You know, the truck stop operators are not they've not buried their heads in the sand. They know what's happening. They know electrification is coming. I think they are kind of waiting to see what's going to play out, because if they go invest in electricity and all of a sudden all their customers are going to hydrogen,
Yeah.
they've just got a lost investment that, frankly, utility has to put a lot of money in to bring, multi-megawatt. I mean, we talked to one operator, and they said, our calculations are if this is all electric, every stop would need to be 15 megawatts, would need 15 megawatts
15?
of power.
Wow.
And that's just one operator. So imagine every interstate exit along I-40, you've got maybe 2 to 4 major truck stops, right? Imagine you've got 2 to 4 locations that each have 15 megawatts of load. That's a wild scenario. So some of the projections. What is the truck stop? What does the fueling station of the future look like? Is it right now they've got unleaded, regular, mid-grade, and premium, and then diesel at the front of house, and in the back of house where all the trucks go, it's all diesel. What happens? Is there a future where we've got I don't know, say 10 1-megawatt charging stations, regular unleaded, premium, diesel, hydrogen? I mean, the possibilities are quite interesting, for truck stop operators, and that's an area where we're kind of trying to gain as much information as we can as to what's going to play out with particularly with this heavy duty Class 7, Class 8 line haul segment. So I'll stop there, but there is a very, very fun, interesting game that's going to be played out with hydrogen versus electric.
And just to add, so I would completely agree, Phil, with the state DOT comment in terms of engaging the state DOTs and bringing them up to speed. But then also to the point of the canary in the coal mine on the distribution side, we've been doing a ton of education and outreach with our distribution utilities, and find it surprising that we're, in some instances, educating them on EV infrastructure, and they're going to be the ones who are having to deploy this in many cases. So we've been, convening working groups, utility working groups, to better understand their specific barriers and hurdles to getting into this business. And so I think that's really important as well. And from the standpoint of planning for some of these stations and kind of looking ahead, we're also thinking through how we can best future-proof the stations that we will be building, such that we can minimize costs later if we want to expand those. And also thinking through how does the design of the station potentially need to change if we're trying to accommodate for medium and heavy duty? Does it need to be a pull-through station rather than just a single parking stall? And those sorts of questions as well. So.
Alexa, I think you bring up a really good point, which is around what some of the distribution utilities, and particularly what the customers are asking for. We've talked to a lot of clients around the country who say, well, our customers are really not asking for electric charging stations. We don't have a lot of EV adoption. We don't even have a lot of forecasted EV adoption. This is something that we really can put off. We'll wait till we see it before we need to take action. But I think what's dangerous about that is this whole commercial piece, and it's the medium and heavy duty piece that I think is going to sneak up on us. Because as Phil mentioned, there's a business case for the fleets. And in my view, we're going to see fleets electrify at a much faster rate than we see residential, particularly if you look at it on a regional basis. If you take the Californias and New Yorks and some of the other places out of the mix. If you look at rural America, maybe we're not going to see passenger vehicles electrify at a high rate soon, although I think the F-150 Lightning might be the
What about the e-Hummer? What about that e-Hummer?
But I think the trends in e-commerce that are driving more and more last mile delivery. I look out my window every day, and it's not just one UPS truck coming every now and then or every other day. It's a UPS truck, a FedEx truck, an Amazon truck, and they're all coming twice a day, right? Those are the vehicles that are ideally suited to electrification. They're going to electrify quickly, and utilities need to be thinking ahead, or else we're going to enter a situation where the fleets are buying these vehicles, and we're going to be telling them, hey, wait, we've got 5 years or 3 years before we can build the substation you need to charge those.
We have in our backyard, Amazon itself, they have 14 locations in our backyard, and they have 3,000 last mile vehicles that they're looking to electrify now, and they're pre-ordering their vehicles. It's upon us. It's not,
To illustrate that a little more, yesterday I met with a truck sales group. They sell medium heavy duty trucking, and I fancy myself, I try to stay kind of plugged in what's happening locally. I had no idea. They have 15 electric delivery vans on their lot 10 miles outside of downtown Nashville. They're not coming. They are here. They also had a Class 8 Nikola semi truck down there that I got to ride in. So it's kind of hard to overstate it. It's not coming. Fleets are here, and it's going to happen. To your point, probably a lot sooner than most people expect.
You brought up the topic of the electric versus the hydrogen. When I think of that at a rest stop or fleet, you know, the electrolysis requires electric too, right? And so when I think we will not, as the utility, we're not going to solve that. That'll be up for the car and the truck, the van manufacturers to solve that. So how do we overcome, or should we be having that debate, or do we let them have the debate? How would the utilities get involved? Because people will throw that out there. Is it because we need to be planning for that 15 megawatt rest stop? Is that the number? Should it be more? You know, because we'll plan for 15. You know, we're not going to plan, you know, we should be doing that final design now. How do we overcome that to have that debate? Recognizing hydrogen, people may throw that into the equation. How would you respond?
Maybe not respond directly to that, but to maybe throw a little context. So if you have let's say a Class 7, Class 8 heavy duty, medium duty vehicle that, let's say if it's a regional, you know, has a regional, it comes back to a home base every day. So you're talking maybe 250, 300 miles a day hauling heavy load, you know, say 30,000 pounds. It works out roughly 500 to 600 kilowatt hours of usage per vehicle per day, 500 kilowatt hours. Now, the size of battery you need is massive. To do that, you need, you know, easily a 700, 800, maybe even a 1 megawatt hour battery. These are not cheap. And you know, as we're hearing, one of the challenges of securing cells, securing batteries is getting harder and harder by the minute. Ford, you know, GM, everybody is building factories as fast as they can, and they still cannot produce enough. So the question will be, will the battery supply be able to handle these, you know, megawatt, you know, multi-hundred kilowatt hour battery packs? Now, if you go hydrogen, you just need a few tanks. You need a few high pressure tanks to store, you know, almost an order of magnitude more energy with hydrogen, compressed hydrogen, obviously. So I guess back to the numbers. So 500 to 600 kilowatt hours per vehicle per day is kind of the draw. If you take the equivalent hydrogen that is needed, if it is produced in, you know, green hydrogen, so if it's produced with renewables, it's, you know, nuclear, if you want to call it pink, whatever color the hydrogen is, I guess avoiding, you know, kind of the natural gas side of it. If you do that, the equivalent is about 3 times more electricity required. So 1,800 to 2,000 kilowatt hours for the same 300 miles per day. So it's you know, if that, I don't know what's going to play out, what's going to happen, because it depends, as you said, on a lot of factors. You know, fuel cells, electrolysis, you know, and kind of the cost of hydrogen actually hitting a competitive threshold, which, you know, we'll see what happens. But you know, the opportunity for utilities could actually be more if we go with hydrogen. If utilities are selling electricity to, you know, for electrolysis, I mean, there's a lot more in that business case than there is for strictly battery electric.
Yeah, so I would say 2 or 3 things, Brian. One is many of you are members of the Low Carbon Research Initiative, LCRI, of EPRI. Many utilities have invested in that, so follow that. They're doing a really good job tracking electrolyzers, hydrogen versus electricity. So follow that cost comparison and see where the Department of Energy has a goal of, what is it, to get the cost of hydrogen down to $3 from about 30 today by 2030. So DOE is really working hard on this. That's number one. Number two, I'd say hedge your bets. I personally believe the electric battery is going to win the race. Hydrogen fuel cells is not going to win the big race, even on the Class 7 and 8, but that's Phil Jones speaking. So that's just one opinion, but you can kind of hedge your bets. If they don't win totally, I think it's going to be a mix of electric and hydrogen fuel cells. Third thing is, and APS is benefiting from this. If you're not talking to Nikola, you should. Your folks on your TE team should be talking to Nikola, Daimler, Volvo, Mack, all of the OEMs, but Nikola in particular. So Nikola has briefed EPRI. I'm on the EPRI board working group of medium heavy duty electrification. And we had the CEO of Nikola present to us about a year ago. It's interesting. So he can't divulge details, none of us can, but they struck a deal with APS, right, to produce fuel, like you said, Ryan. Electrolyzers take a lot of electricity, right? But of course, Nikola wanted a deal. And I'm not privy to say what the deal is, but it's a pretty good deal for Nikola because they did it. It's a good deal for APS. They've justified it with their regulators, but they struck a kind of a long-term new tariff rate. It's probably under a special contract, and they justify it by the load factor. You know, they're saying these electrolyzers that we're going to deploy in Arizona in your service territory, very good load factor, 90% plus, no seasonality. You can depend on us to produce the fuel, blah, blah, blah. Nikola is also producing mobile units. So these big units, so they can be stationary, or you can put them on a hydrogen fuel cell truck and take them to truck stops or other areas. So my advice to you is, you know, keep the lines of communication open with DOE and with folks like Nikola.
Thank you. So we're coming up in 10 minutes to go. I've got to ask one more question, then open it up to the audience. What's your reaction to the Department of Transportation, the DOE joint office? What's your view?
So we've had a lot of great engagement. They were one of the first federal agencies to release their RFI and put that out on the street. They've been extremely proactive. We spoke to them last week. I feel like they've been very responsive to questions for technical assistance. Obviously, they have a lot on their plate, a lot that they're tackling, and they fully admit that in some instances they're behind us in terms of implementation, but you can tell that I think they're doing a really good job. They've been very responsive to concerns that we've raised. So for instance, the Buy America compliance requirements that are attached to the National EV Infrastructure Program, that's been a concern of ours from day one. They just recently, last week, released some new guidance on that, which I think is promising. So they're tackling things, you know, by the day, but we've been impressed so far. Michael Barabee has been, you know, his team is great so far. We are also very engaged with the National Association of State Energy Officials. They're working in conjunction with AASHTO on the State Highway Transportation Official side to convene kind of a national working group that will be focused on, you know, once the states finish this mad dash to get their plans in by August 1st, a working group that will be more focused on implementation of the National EV Infrastructure Program and kind of thinking through all the things we have to consider in actually deploying these funds. And so NASIO and AASHTO will be the lead partners on that so that we can work with our counterpart states in implementing that. But
No, I'll try to keep it short so we can get audience questions, but you know, transportation cannot exist without energy. The two are inextricably tied. They just happen to have been, you know, dependent upon liquid fuels for the last 100 years, but that's changing pretty significantly. So it was, you know, a perfect move to create this joint office between transportation and energy, and I think it's just going to continue to evolve. And as I mean, they're now staffing up. They've got a lot of work ahead of them, but it's exciting to see the two that are now joined at the hip. You know, as a plug for Tennessee, Tennessee's been doing this kind of ahead of the curve on you know, kind of working with the transportation office and kind of really looking into energy transportation.
So we'll open it up. Questions from the audience.
Dave Townley with CTC Global. Just a question. We're talking about a time period and a shift from internal combustion engines to electric. But during this same time period, there's an open question about who's going to be behind the wheel. Is that an accelerating factor where you've got even more fleets being developed to provide services versus a large number of individual choices over electric or not, particularly in the light vehicle? Any comments on that?
Are you asking who or what is going to be behind the wheel?
Will it accelerate the
Autonomous?
conversion?
So you're asking about autonomous vehicles? To autonomous. I'll start. I'm a bit of a skeptic on that. I think there's a lot of potential. Even if you buy the new EVs coming out, whether it be a Model Y or a Model 3 or the Cadillac Lyriq, they all have, what is it? There are 5 levels of control of autonomous driving, and they go up to level 4, not level 5. So I'm a big fan of that, but going to full autonomous, level 5, you have regulatory issues with NHTSA. You have regulatory issues with the city. You have accidents. You have the sensing capability, as we've seen in the newspapers, is not perhaps what it's advertised to be. So I'm a little more skeptical on full autonomous, but I think introducing more autonomous driving capabilities into the not only light-duty vehicles, but if you look at the Tesla Semi truck, if you look at the e-Cascadia of Daimler, what Volvo and Mack and PACCAR are developing, some of these trucks are developing autonomous driving capabilities too. There's a big shortage of truck drivers now. Have you seen the wages gone up for truck drivers? They make a lot of money, and we still have a shortage of truck drivers. And so, yeah, there's going to be a role for autonomous, I think, in medium heavy duty. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that you're going to see these. And I agree that I think we're probably a little bit further behind on autonomous vehicles than we are electric vehicles. But you're going to see these happen in, really in concert, because it all goes back to the digitalization of transportation and how that's all going to work. And I would think that you're going to need a lot of energy to power these the computers and everything that are driving the autonomous technologies. In fact, my understanding is those provide a pretty significant drain on batteries, and so it's just going to accelerate the need for the larger batteries and faster charging.
I mean, tearing personally owned vehicle, from a consumer's hands, I think it's a long, long way off. That strikes me that there are some very specific applications for autonomy that I think we'll start to see, very heavy penetration once the technology gets there. Last week I was down in Oxford, Mississippi, of all places, at campus of Ole Miss, and there were I counted at least 10 electric delivery robots, fully autonomous electric delivery robots running around campus, using the sidewalk, using the road. As soon as you stepped in front of them, they would stop, wait for you to clear, or if you didn't clear, they would go around you. So there's some interesting, new niches and applications I think we'll start to see. We may see more in the way of, on highways. I'm blanking on the term for it, but platooning, truck platooning. Can you take advantage of several vehicles? Can you kind of create a virtual 10 unit trailer, just by kind of drafting and streamlining off one another. I think there's going to be more. We're going to see more innovation in that sector for new applications than we are necessarily the strict conversion from personally driven to autonomously.
Yeah, I would agree with the specific applications. I was at ORNL recently to see a demonstration of a wireless electric vehicle charging unit, and they were speaking about kind of one of the most compelling use cases for that being like an Amazon, for instance, if they have 10,000 electric vehicles that are charging overnight, but they're using autonomous just for parking and shifting to share the charger. When one vehicle's done, then they move, and the other one, moves itself. So I could see autonomous playing into certain use cases, but maybe not, everybody out there on the roads.
I know that they have, I think it's in Norway, they have a unmanned all-electric ferry. Delivery. It's going between ports, unmanned, all-electric.
Yeah,
on the seas.
Mack has a completely autonomous dump truck that they use in quarries to drive, rock to the top.
Hey, I'm Tom Moore. I'm retired from Southern Company. I'm now with a company called Surveying and Mapping, SAM, and we do pretty much anything that has to do with surveying in every end of the technology. So I'm interested in a lot of what you said. You did a great job today, and I very much appreciate Larry getting this together. I think it was very timely. I'm interested in where can I learn more? I mean, a lot of facts today, a lot of statistics, that kind of thing. Is there a source or sources that you could share with us that myself and other colleagues that I might have could go out and become more
Sure.
learned about this, and particularly about the company I'm working with now? We're doing some work already with Duke Power and some other folks on siting preliminary charging station locations and that kind of thing. So we have obviously a business interest in understanding how this is going to roll out.
Well, give me your card and I'll send you some. I'm sure Kevin and all of us have sources, but we have a very good website. I'll share our AT website. A lot is on there. Atlas Public Policy is a data firm. We work a lot with Atlas, and they have called EV Hub. Is very good. NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, has a lot of good resources. NREL, you can go there. Oak Ridge. So there are a lot of the national labs have stuff, and I'll also refer you to the Fuels Institute, and there's a group I spoke to in Chicago that does mapping, surveying. This is the traditional fossil fuel industry, the way they deploy infrastructure, mapping, permitting, future-proofing, you know, this whole future-proofing idea, how you put conduit in, you know, the real nitty-gritty of deploying a charging station. So they've produced a couple of good white papers that I can share with you, too.
You also mentioned EPRI. I'm sure EPRI has got
EPRI, too.
tons of stuff.
Yeah.
I think the joint DOE-DOT website
Is good, too.
tremendous, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
particularly for a one-stop shopping, it's got a lot of good information.
And then also the DOE's Alternative Fuels Data Center
that's
has a
good.
ton of tools and resources as well.
Thank you.
Can I just add one more comment to that? I think probably the best thing to do is conversations with people, particularly with these folks in these other industries. I think I can't emphasize that enough, just getting out there and talking to people about how their business runs and what their thoughts are on this conversion.
Over here. Time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all your insights, and it was chock full of data and information for us to digest. My name is Julia Fair. I'm with London Economics, and I work with some of the WIRES members from time to time. One of my areas of interest and passion is transmission planning and thinking through maybe in some ways how I merge what I heard from this panel with what I heard from the commissioner this morning, and thinking a little bit also about legislative support coming out of DC on integrating electricity system, enhancing the electricity system. And to the question, where does transmission come in? One of the thoughts I wanted to ask you to see if you kind of shared this, as I look about ourselves as consumers, in this room all of us consume electricity, and think about what are we limited by? Well, we're actually limited by time. And I wonder to what extent that when we think about the consumers in the electric vehicle space, the fleet owners, the individual households consuming, we all want timely electricity. Just like we want the lights to turn on when we push the switch, we want the electricity to charge up our vehicles when we want it. But production of clean energy is not always at that same exact moment. So from a planning perspective and thinking longer term, is the secret sauce for transmission really thinking about how transmission can serve to facilitate that movement of electricity supply to electricity demand? Think of all the electric vehicles and the needs of the system. We, of course, need to fix the distribution system to get it to the final mile, but we also need the transmission system to deal with our limited time.
Yeah, I think you've touched on something that we've danced around on here, we haven't really addressed directly, which is that electricity is only beneficial, electrification is only beneficial if you're taking that from clean sources. We talked about green hydrogen. That's only one kind of hydrogen, right? And then, of course, the electricity itself, if not generated from renewables, is subject to criticism from others. It's one of the criticisms of EVs. So I think that transmission is going to play a pretty large role in ensuring that we get those large-scale renewables and we're moving that power from those resources to the load that we're electrifying. Otherwise, to what end?
So is that very Very good question, and kind of illustrated in TVA within the Tennessee Valley. So the bulk of our clean generation is built in nuclear and hydro. Majority of that exists in the eastern part of our service area, so East Tennessee. We project the majority of EV adoption is going to be in Middle Tennessee, in the greater Nashville area. So today, I think 40% of all the EVs in our service area are in the greater Nashville region. So the clean energy is being produced in East Tennessee, give or take, being used by EVs in Middle Tennessee. We also have a 1,600 megawatt pump storage system in East Tennessee as well. As so to your point, kind of how do you balance how do you get the power there? I mean, at the end of the day, while we have kind of there's large national projections of EV adoption across the country and across states and even across service areas, it is going to be localized. It's going to be localized. I mean, all data seems to point to city adoption within metro areas and cities. So it's kind of illustrates the point of getting power from your generation, whether it's solar in kind of more remote areas. It's hydro. It's nuclear. It's getting I think kind of just continuing to invest in the transmission system to get it to and from. And that's I want to touch on the storage as well, because the timing of these resources as we bring on more solar to our system. We've got in our last IRP our kind of stated goal of 14 gigawatts of solar on the TVA system. Timing that is going to be a challenge, and it's almost going to be impossible without some level of storage investment. So storage will be another piece of that. Now the transmission level storage is an area. One of TVA's kind of 6 transformative initiatives we're looking at is how do we unlock some of those zero carbon generation sources with energy storage.
And it can also be shifting the load to be coincident with the production of renewables. And I think in California, they've taken some steps to create favorable rates that encourage drivers to charge in the daytime when they have excess renewables. So there's a rates piece of this as well.
Hawaii as well, and I'd just put in a pitch for planning, whether it's a TE plan, a transportation electrification plan, or a traditional IRP plan, you should be looking at transmission. Many IRPs do this today, but some don't. So as we decarbonize, you're right. You need to bring in the transmission element, the distribution system upgrade element, and as you said, the timing is going to be critical. It takes, 12 years to build a transmission line, if you can get one built at all. It sometimes takes 6 years to site a substation, and sometimes environmental activists and residents don't like a substation in their backyard, and they will oppose any substation. And so the building out of these infrastructure facilities, the timing of it is going to be key, because as we discussed on these panels, the fleets aren't going to wait for utilities. Some of these Gen 1 trucks are coming in 2025, 2024. So you only have 3 years. In utility speak, in the utility time horizon, that's like an instant. We really have to have a sense of urgency here.
Well, thank you. We're past our hour. On behalf of WIRES and the members, I would like to thank Alexa, Ryan, Kevin, and Phil. This has been really, really great. Thank you for indulging us and giving us your comments. And so please share appreciation for the panel. Now, are you going to make some closing?
There we go. I'll just wrap up really briefly. I want to thank Ryan, you, for moderating this panel. I want to thank all of our panelists on this discussion. I think it was really timely, very informative, and really appreciate hearing your different perspectives on it. Will, I don't know if you have any closing remarks. I just want to thank everybody for being here today and last evening. I think it's been a fantastic event. I'll let Will wrap it up and close it out. They're just in the process of finishing up, setting up the luncheon, so might need like another minute or two. Give everybody a chance to kind of pack up. But Will, I'll turn it over to you to wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. And first of all, thank you, Larry, for your leadership and getting everybody together here in Nashville. Certainly look forward to celebrating together and having additional discussions in Newport in July. So look forward to that. Thank you very much to the panel. Really appreciated this panel as well as the last one, and Commissioner Danley's remarks as well. So fantastic event. This concludes the gathering in Nashville. So thank you all for making it possible.